Good morning to the Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, online viewers, radio listeners via St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM, and other radio stations. I'm Relika Roach, and welcome to the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, October 17th, 2018. At this time, I invite the Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment, and Infrastructure, the Honorable Miklos Giterson, to address you. Minister Giterson.
Good morning, and thank you, Ms. Roach. Good morning, Deputy Prime Minister, fellow ministers, press, and audience members viewing and listening. This week on Island, we have a delegation from the World Bank on what's called a Social Safeguards Mission for the Emergency Debris Management Project. Just to explain a little what this mission is about, safeguards policies are essential to prevent and mitigate undue harm to people and their environment in any large project. When identifying and designing a project, safeguards help to assess the possible environmental and social risks and the impacts, positive or negative, associated with a development intervention. This emergency management debris project, which mainly includes the fire suppression activities for both landfills, needs to ensure that we take the proper safeguards into consideration, as we have a responsibility to not negatively harm the environment or persons in the community as we seek to extinguish the underground fires. This is a very important step in a very important project that we need to take the time to get right. While on island, this delegation will be meeting with the ministry counterparts, particularly of the VSA, VROMI, and Justice Ministries. The team will be presenting the World Bank safeguards process. They will also visit the landfill site and surrounding settlement, discuss stakeholder engagement and the consultation process, and meet with the representatives from the community and NGOs working in the area. Lastly, it is the intention to agree on an action plan at the end of their visit. The meetings this week represent an escalation of this project. It goes without saying that we are all very concerned with the fires and smoke that have been coming from the landfill. We have implored the World Bank to move a little faster with us and our recovery projects. And I am happy that the World Bank has taken up the challenge and that we are moving along in the right direction. Next, as Minister of ROMI, I am aware of the delays currently being experienced at our permits department and the sense of frustration our citizens are experiencing. Our permits department has been dealing with an extensive backlog for a number of years, which has only been complicated by the post-Hurricane Irma construction boom. In trying to mitigate the issues of the ministry, the ministry has requested and has received approval from the government of the Netherlands to have 3 technical workers transferred to St. Martin for a period of 4 months to assist with the backlog, as well as improve the financial management of the department. The department is also actively recruiting to retain permanent help. A few weeks ago, I visited our sister department at the Ministry of Traffic, Transport, and Urban Planning in Curaçao, and during this trip, we received a presentation that showcased their permits department functions and how Giterson intends to streamline and digitize their building permit process. There were a number of best practices that we were able to note, and we are currently researching the best ways to implement these and other practices so that we can have a better functioning, modernized department. Until then, please know that this matter and these delays have my attention, and it is something that we are actively working on. Next, on Friday last week, October 12th, our members of parliament were invited by the government to tour 3 hurricane shelters. The purpose of the tour was to inform Parliament on the management of the island shelters and give an update on the upgrading of the shelter facilities under the Upgrading Shelters SXM 2018 project, funded by the Recovery and Resilience Trust Fund. The group visited the Christian Fellowship Church in Colby, the Milton Peters College Gym Hall in South Reward, and the Dutch Quarter Community Center. They also visited the transition shelter called the Tea Shelter in Sucker Garden. The parliamentarians were accompanied on tour by key civil servants of the Vrummy and VSA ministries and were guided by Kurt Ruan, Department Head of Vrummy's New Projects Development and Planning, and Ms. Joy Arnell, Secretary General of VSA. Mr. Ruan, during his presentation, gave an update of the Upgrading Shelters SXM 2018 project. In this project, 13 already identified shelters will be outfitted with an underground water tank, a 16 kVA generator, a 1,000-liter diesel tank, and new aluminum shutters for all windows. In addition, damaged roofs, windows, doors, and shutters of all shelters will be repaired. Ms. Arnell's presentation focused on the management of the shelters once activated. Under the responsibility of ESF 7, the Department of Community Development, Family and Humanitarian Affairs is charged with the general management of shelters once they have been properly secured by Vrummy. Also present on the tour were representatives of the St. Martin Development Fund and the St. Martin Red Cross. Both representatives shared their organization's efforts in the community post-Hurricane Irma, including the repairing and rebuilding of several houses. They also shared with the members of Parliament current projects aimed at fostering of community togetherness and providing communities with multifunctional spaces that could easily convert into additional shelter spaces if needed. I was happy that the government could facilitate this tour so that our members of Parliament could get a better understanding of the current shelter situation, the challenges that we intend to address as best as we can, and our vision of what we are working towards in providing safe and comfortable facilities for our people in case of disasters. This concludes my press briefing for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Giterson, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Minister of Tourism, Economic Affairs, Transport, and Telecommunication, the Honorable Stuart Johnson, to address you. Minister Johnson.
Colleagues in the Council of Ministers, members of the press, persons listening live and via subsequent broadcast, people of St. Martin, good morning. Over the past few days, Facebook and other forms of social media have been buzzing with false accusations and claims as it relates to my person. I have taken note of such, primarily because my integrity and my character is falsely being slandered. It is unfortunate that these types of gossip serves as a distraction from the work of rebuilding the economy of St. Martin for the people of St. Martin. Consequently, I have filed an official complaint on Monday with the police department. As the matter is now under investigation, I am not at liberty to disclose any information regarding the subject matter. I intend to continue focusing on the task of economic revitalization and the sustainable redevelopment of our tourism product. Many people are still without jobs, and there are still many whose homes are far from finished and being repaired over 1 year since Hurricane Irma devastated our country. We have significant challenges ahead, and focus remains heavily on ensuring the Princess Juliana International Airport's main terminal building is reopened to accommodate our arriving visitors for what we hope to be a very active tourism season. Later this week, I will be visiting the Royal Palm Beach Resort and the Mullet Bay Towers to get updates on their progress and their repair efforts, as it is essential that these and other timeshare properties reopen so that we can start welcoming back the many timeshare owners to our shores. Their reopening also means people return to their jobs. And the returning of them to their jobs, I cannot help but worry about how many people in the hospitality industry who could be facing yet another Christmas without any prospect of a job to provide for themselves and their families. I also want to convey to these timeshare resort operators that some of the timeshare owners who have been visiting our island consistently for more than 30 years are reaching out to government officials and expressing their eagerness to return. And we must increase the pace to show that we are open for business and ready to welcome them back. Meanwhile, I have also initiated talks with the St. Martin Chamber of Commerce and Industry to see how we can put energy and life into Phillipsburg. And they have assured me that they are working with businesses to create entertainment for all our visitors. I will be reaching out to the Ministry of Rummy to continue discussions about the impending construction of the Planet Hollywood at the former Great Bay Beach Resort property. These are some of the matters my cabinet and I have been working on behind the scenes to ensure we rebuild our economy quickly and provide economic stability for all our citizens. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister Johnson, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Minister of Public Health, Social Development and Labor, the Honorable E.Lee, to address you. Minister Lee.
Thanks. Good morning. Good morning, fellow ministers, media, those attending the press conference, and those listening by radio, television, or internet. I have a couple points to touch on. Number one, I'd like to report on a trip to Panama where a delegation attended the 19th American Regional Meeting of the ILO, or International Labor Organization. This is a conference for the Americas, so that includes North America, South America, and the Caribbean, and the theme was preparing for the future of work that we want. We had representatives from the Ministry of VSA, the Department of Labor, that's Len Dykstra, Linda Froston, Nikema Hickinson, and myself, as well as we had workers' representatives, Natalie Franz, Sophie Rismay Peterson, and we had employers' representatives in the person of Shervin Fredericks. I think it's a great conference. It's an opportunity, number one, for the stakeholders, the labor, union, and government to spend some time together. Sometimes we just meet on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. So this is an opportunity for us to really spend a little bit of time to get to know each other. But more importantly, this is an opportunity for all of us to listen to what other countries are doing, what their challenges are, what their experiences are, what the different types of agendas in terms of where they're going in terms of their labor market and how they're working together. So it was an excellent opportunity to listen to other countries, to understand what are the global trends, what are some of the challenges. And I must say that after listening to what some of the other countries are facing, I mean, they really have, for example, union leaders who are persecuted. They really have very different economic and challenges and labor challenges in different countries. And the Caribbean, I think, is very different than when you listen to Mexico or Peru, for example, what their challenges are. There's some common themes in the conference, themes that I think fit very well to the Caribbean. One of the primary themes is about social dialogue. The ILO certainly stands for and believes in that if you're going to make progress in your community, it's important that it's done with consensus. So in other words, all of the stakeholders, and that's government, unions, or workers and business, really should try and do that collectively. Labor productivity, they look at the region in terms of its productivity compared to other parts of the world, and I think that the region has some challenges to meet there. Efficient labor market preparation, in other words, where is the future of labor? I mean, you have technology, a lot of changes in terms of what types of jobs are going to be there for the future. Robotics, I mean, again, that's not so much of a concern for St. Martin, but other countries are looking at what the impact of that is on their labor market. And I think also a good theme, a good discussion point is about economic development, because as the Minister of TIAT touched on, if the economy doesn't perform, then the employment market suffers as well. So some very good themes, some very good discussions. I think one of the better meetings, actually, one of the best or most productive parts of the conference was actually a pre-meeting. The ILO, I think, in recognition that the Caribbean is different than some of the other Latin and South American countries, organized a special day just for Caribbean islands, and under the theme about building resilient societies in a disaster-prone world. So many of the other countries you look at, they have multiple forms of industry, so they may have mining, they may have production, they may have tourism, and so if one segment of their economy gets damaged, there's other segments that hopefully could pick it up. But the Caribbean is obviously very heavily tourism dependent, and given the recent storms, the impact on that, it was very interesting, sad in a sense, to listen to some of the other Caribbean countries, the British Virgin Islands, Dominica. Some of these countries have been hit extremely hard, just like St. Martin, and so it was interesting to listen to each other to learn about what different countries are doing. And again, I would say that in comparison, I know that there's a lot of people out there suffering. I know there's still a lot of challenges, but when you look at others in the region, I think St. Martin is doing, moving in the right direction. In addition, the General Director for the ILO, Mr. Guy Ryder, he's based in, I think, Switzerland. We did have a side meeting, actually, with all of the members of the representatives from the delegation. We had an opportunity to present him our consensus document. We have a document that has the unanimous support of the workers, business, and government in terms of labor reform, and I think that it was very impressive for him to see that actually the unions and everybody were holding one head. We came to the meeting together, everybody supported each other, and clearly he could see that we were a cohesive and united group, and I think he was very impressed by that and by our consensus document. We took the opportunity to explain to him some of the changes that are proposed to our civil code, and also asked for their support in terms of how can we help our partners, in particular the unions and the employers' organizations, to strengthen their role in terms of their representation of their members. The second topic I'd like to touch on is I attended another conference. This is the 12th Annual Conference on National Health Care Financing in Suriname. I was invited as a keynote speaker, and actually the first conference I attended, I think, was about 2 years ago in Bonaire. And it is a focus, this is all of the different Caribbean islands talking about how they are financing their healthcare system. So the challenges that St. Martin faces are the same challenges that our Caribbean brothers and sisters are facing. And I must say that many of the ideas, many of the discussions there were very relevant to our plans for universal health insurance in St. Martin. So I, for one, have learned an awful lot from the conference. As a matter of fact, many of the relationships that we built there, we've invited them to some of our seminars and to some of our work sessions here in St. Martin, and their input's been tremendous and very helpful. So I was invited as a keynote speaker, and I had an opportunity to explain. Actually, the legislation for universal health insurance is actually going through the higher councils now. I think it's come through the SARE, it's coming back to government, and it's soon on its way to Council of Advice. So we are making the rounds with our final version. And so it was an opportunity actually to present to all of the Caribbean countries what we're planning to do in St. Martin. And I think we have a plan that's very innovative. I think we've tried to take into account all of the comments and concerns of stakeholders. And so it was a great opportunity to present what we are doing in St. Martin and get an opportunity for feedback, which I must say has been very, very positive. So just for the community to understand, why is it that we're focusing on universal health insurance? Besides the fact that it's a United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, meaning that this is a worldwide goal that everyone has recognized as being important, and I'm going to take the time to read the definition of universal health coverage. All people and communities can use the promotive, preventive, curative, rehabilitative, and palliative health services they need of sufficient quality to be effective, while also ensuring that the use of the services does not expose the user to financial hardship. So translated, what does that mean? It means that we believe that everybody in the community should have access to health care. And right now, there's many people in our communities that do not have access to health care. We have a very fragmented system, and unfortunately, there's people who fall between the gaps and they have challenges getting access to health care. And I don't believe that that's correct. I think access to health care is a human right. And then we need to look at our whole healthcare system, and that's part of our healthcare reform, is how do we make sure, number one, sure, we give access to healthcare, but what is the quality of that healthcare? We need to make sure that the quality is good, and we need to make sure that it's affordable. So we need to look at our system, and how do we look at where the leakages, where's the waste in our system? How do we eliminate that so that more money can be spent directly on healthcare? So some of the topics for discussion, for example, was very interesting to see what other countries have done with their pharmaceutical costs. Some of them have saved almost half of their pharmaceutical costs. Diabetic care programs. Again, some of our country's neighbors have implemented great programs in the community. Education's a big part of it. How do we educate families, children, so they develop good behavior from the beginning? So again, I'm all for, if somebody has a program that works somewhere else, we do not need to reinvent the wheel. I'm more than happy to borrow it from somebody else and implement it here, and that's exactly what we're working on. Prevention was a big topic. Do we invest in prevention? The problem with prevention is that when you make your investments, the return on it isn't necessarily very transparent, right? So if we invest money in the community and we keep our population healthy, that doesn't show up on a balance sheet somewhere else. So how do we make sure that we recognize the value of it while everybody sees it? Getting the budget allocations towards prevention is a challenge. Very interesting, I thought it was more of a St. Martin phenomenon, but actually many of the countries reported that compliance is an issue. And I'm not talking about financial compliance. What I'm talking about is we have many people in our community, for example, who have diabetes or high blood pressure. It's been properly diagnosed. They've been given medications, but yet the people are not taking the medications as they're supposed to. I hear it too often in the community that people, for example, with high blood pressure, they only take their blood pressure medicine when they feel like their pressure's too high. And this is a common theme that's happening throughout the world, and in particular the Caribbean, and that's something that, again, is impacting the health and quality of life of our people, but also impacts the costs, the budgets for our healthcare system. Another very interesting common theme is health in all policies. I think I've touched on this. We need to look in the same line as prevention. We do, for example, have a helmet and seatbelt law. People are obligated by law to wear helmets if you're riding motorcycles or scooters. They are obligated to wear seatbelts. I see too many cars driving around. There's a small toddler inside bouncing around the front seat, back seat, front seat, back seat. That's a risk. And in the end, those are all things that we need to really address as a community. One of my more common complaints is about, people call and say, oh, we have septic water running in our streets. It's bad for our health, but yet we need to look at, and the ministry is working with the Ministry of Romy, how do we develop policies to make sure that the problems don't come in the first place? Because again, just like healthcare, prevention is cheaper than cure, right? So solving the problems after the fact is very different than solving it ahead of time. So health in all policies is definitely something that the ministry is going to be looking at. The hospital, of course, is a cornerstone of reforming for our healthcare system. I would touch on that briefly. I think it's in the papers. It's been in the papers already. We started with the strengthening of the roof of the SMMC. So while we're moving ahead with the construction of the new general hospital, we hope to have the building permit very soon, Minister. And as soon as we have the building permit in place, we're ready to finalize the financing agreement and break ground and start construction of our new general hospital. But we need to reinforce the current hospital, and that's part of the grant money from the trust fund via the World Bank. And I wanted to touch just briefly on a side note. So while that project is moving, so if I look at it, the first tranche was $127.7 million, right? So there's 4 different projects in there. Number 1 is the hospital project for $25 million. And I think it's interesting to note that from the time the grant agreement was signed to the time of the approval for the project was within 3 months. The same thing, we have a emergency income support program and training program for $22.5 million. Again, from the time that we initiated the discussions with World Bank to the approval was 3.5 months. So the perception that the money is slow, certainly the time for the agreement with Holland took time and getting all of the infrastructure in place, but my experience has been, so far, a positive experience, right? That, of course, we'd like to see the money come in sooner, but we found the World Bank, and this is why I'm touching on the subject, because the World Bank team is here for the hospital. We have found them to be excellent partners in the hospital project. So not only when we had our proposals, their technical people help us to advise how do we reform, how do we make our proposal so that it would be acceptable. So our experience has been positive in that sense. And the other projects, the first project on emergency repairs, disaster preparedness, and public utilities is also in execution, and that took about 2.5 months, and that was for $55.2 million. And the last phase is the debris removal and assistance with the solid waste project, and that's in process, and we're hoping that within 2 weeks the approvals will be in place for that as well. And the last topic is, as we touched on prevention, again, the ministry is active with prevention, and I just wanted to remind people that there is currently breast screening locations. So, for example, today on the 17th, the St. Martin Diagnostic Center, the Union Medical Clinic. So these are places that are giving free breast examinations. Again, the idea is prevention, so that early diagnosis to prevent breast cancer detection at a later stage where it's obviously more impactful and, again, more expensive to treat. And tomorrow, I'll just read off for tomorrow as well, Dutch Quarter Clinic, Oasis Medical Center, and Pure Health Clinic. And then there's a schedule that goes all the way through to the end of October. And if I remember, the SMMC has a free screening at the hospital this weekend as well. All of these things, we'll make sure we'll put it into our press release so that people have access. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Lee, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, the Honorable Wycliffe Smith, to address you. Minister Smith.
Thank you, Ms. Roach. Greetings to all gathered here this morning, honorable ministers, the Department of Communications, members of the press, as well as those who are listening and viewing via radio, television, or social media. Good morning, Sualiga. Let me start with an update from Tallahassee. I'd like to inform you that our students in our sister city, Tallahassee, Florida. They were spared in the passing of Hurricane Michael last Wednesday. I'm pleased to announce that the majority of the students returned to school on Monday, October 15th. All of the schools where our students attend in Tallahassee have been reopened. The reports are that damages received were minimal, and already electricity has been restored to the majority of that area affected by the hurricane. I would really like to thank the staff of the Division Study Financing, especially Lisa Carter and Calvin Mardenborough, as well as Peter Gittens, chef of my cabinet, for their dedication during this particular time and for keeping track of the students during the hurricane. Also, we could not have done this without the kind assistance and the cooperation of the team at the Tallahassee St. Martin Foundation and the city officials of Tallahassee. While we're grateful for how well our students are faring post-Hurricane Michael, we are mindful of those who suffered greater loss and are still struggling in these times. Our sympathies go out to them, and not only to those suffering in Tallahassee, but also to those affected throughout Florida and the other states that have been impacted. Last week, I met with the board of the Advancement in Vocational Education Foundation, the NIPA, which has an oversight for the National Institute for Professional Advancement. I got an insight into the collaborative work with the Metal Industrial Company Institute of Technology, MIC-IT, from Trinidad and Tobago. The instructors are pleased with the progress of our students, and the government is committed to the continuity of these programs at the NIPA. The Student Support Services Division is organizing an interactive and informative panel discussion entitled Fighting in Schools: The Role of Schools, the Role of Parents, Police, and Social Media. The general public, especially parents, teachers, and other interested persons in the community, are encouraged to come out to this discussion, which will be held on Wednesday, November 7th, 2018, at the University of St. Martin from 7 p.m. until 9 p.m. The objective of the workshop is to educate and empower parents, teachers, and the general public via an open panel discussion regarding this recent surge in school fights, the influence of social media, and the responsibility of the schools, the parents, and the police. We anticipate a fruitful and interesting discussion with our hand-selected panelists leading to solutions for the way forward. The Department of Education will be hosting an Education in Emergencies workshop. This workshop focuses on the continuity of education during and after emergencies. Representatives from all school boards will be attending this 3-day workshop in November. This is another effort in hurricane preparedness in all forms as we continue to overcome together to deal with situations after disaster as it relates to the education of our children. And now a few items from the Department of Sport. In cricket, at the recently held Mazda Super 20 tournament, 5 cricket teams competed and a newcomer, the Gladiators Cricket Club, bested the rest to come home and take the prize. Congratulations to all the teams. In netball, our under-13 team held their own in a regional tournament in St. Kitts. The trainers were working with the girls to develop their talents from early so that netball will be one of our top sports here in St. Martin. Domino's Inter-School Dinghy Sailing Championship had to be postponed due to the heavy rains on Saturday. The new date for this regatta is now set for November the 3rd, 2018. And in kickboxing, we also celebrate the St. Martin Martial Arts Federation, the SMMAF team of fighters who competed in the exciting Honor Fight League 2, which took place in Curacao. All 3 fighters hailing from St. Martin were victorious. The team was represented by a 17-year-old Avish Dylan Vayasiri Vardano, Charlie Marsham, and Akeem Lewis. And the team was led by kickboxing veteran Sensei Marco London, winner of the Brown Pelican Sports Award Icon in 2016. Talking about the Brown Pelican Awards, a reminder, this year's Brown Pelican Awards will be held on Sunday, November 18th at the Princess Port de Plaisance Hotel under the theme Boxing. The ceremony will be highlighting our local boxing legends on their outstanding contribution to the boxing sport on the island. That's November 18th. Save the date because sports matter. From the Department of Youth, the Spelling Bee competition. On Sunday, the Scotiabank Rotary Rotaract Spelling Bee competition started off with 34 students from 12 local schools and 2 schools from Anguilla. At the end of the first round, the top 10 performers were identified to move on to round 2, which will take place on Sunday, October the 21st at the Bel Air Community Center. Despite the fact that we are living in an age in which social media does not encourage good spelling, and an age in which we all have a spell checker on our smartphones, being able to spell is still very important. It enhances your vocabulary and your reading skills and opens up the world of literature to you. Being able to spell well can also further one's chances in life. For example, if you write an application letter that is full of spelling errors, it could cause you not to get that job. So I encourage parents and the general public to go out and show your support for our youth. Cheer them on, because they all are already winners. And from the Department of Culture, in my presentation of responses to the members of Parliament, I repeatedly mentioned the dire straits that the Phillipsburg Jubilee Library is in. I'm calling for an urgent meeting with the board of the library, and we expect to have that meeting very soon. The staff of the library, they have demonstrated their resilience and unwavering commitment to providing our nation with this very valuable service. I've asked for that meeting, and I expect that it will take place very soon. And especially after the heavy rains last Saturday, we all realize that something needs to be done about our library, and it needs to be done fast. It has been over a year now since the hurricanes hit, and it is time for us to start fixing the library as we continue to overcome together. In my capacity as acting Prime Minister, I had the privilege yesterday of meeting the VNG International, simply called VNG, which is the acronym for Association of Dutch Municipalities. The VNG offers support, training, and services not only to cities and municipalities in the Netherlands, but internationally as well. After several discussions with especially the Ministries of General Affairs, VSA and VROMI, a project plan was developed to assist the government of St. Maarten in preparing especially government organizations for crisis and disaster management. Together with the government of St. Maarten, the VNG will work on a revision of the current disaster management structure through training and exercises, and they will work on improving the access to information as it relates to disaster management purposes. Furthermore, specific attention will be given to the psychological preparedness of the people involved in emergency services. Another aspect of the VNG will be assisting with is the defining and implementation of a sustainable and disaster-proof building code. The burgemeester, or the mayor of the city of Utrecht, whose wife is from St. Maarten, is the current chair of the VNG International, and he's currently on an official visit to the Best Islands and the Caribbean countries in the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Mayor Jan van Zanen told me that he's very pleased to see the resiliency of the people of St. Maarten and how fast we are building back. Mayor van Zanen is joined on this trip by Pieter Jeroense, Deputy General Director of the VNG International, and by Maarten Beks, Senior Policy Officer to the Caribbean Islands. This is what I want to share with you this morning. If there are questions, I am available to answer So thank you very much for watching and for listening, and have a pleasant day.
Thank you, Minister Smith, for your opening remarks. If you've just joined us, you are watching the live Council of Ministers press briefing. We now move on to the question and answer session. Due to our time constraints, we will only have 2 rounds of questions. Stephen Cerillion of PJ82 Radio, you have the floor.
Excellencies, good morning. Mr. Smith, that was a beautiful sports run-up. I love it. My question is for the Minister of TIAT. You've addressed the situation as it pertains to your person regarding the circulation of the post on social media. You said that, well, you have dismissed it as rumors. You also said that you have filed a complaint with the police as well. Why the police and not directly the prosecutor's office?
Thank you, Stephen, for your question. And of course, as I made mention of in the beginning of my opening address this morning, the matter is under investigation. And so at this time, I reserve my right to not further make any statements in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Johnson. Lyndon Brown of BCN TV, you have the floor.
Good morning to the people of St. Martin and to our wonderful ministers. Be courageous. Minister Lee, recently you was barred from entering the airport construction site. Did you revisit the occasion?
Actually, on that same day, we already entered the premises because there is no legal basis to deny the inspectorate from accessing. So, and a formal letter has been sent by the inspectorate as well. And I think that there's clarity from the airport now in terms of their understanding, in terms of the law, and in terms of what access they need to provide.
But there wasn't a reason why he was barred from entering? What was the reason?
I don't know.
Thank you, Minister Lee. Andrew Dick of the Daily Herald, you have the floor.
Good morning to the ministers. Minister Johnson, concerning the same situation, can you at least tell us about the dismissal of the cabinet member?
Andrew, thank you for your question. And of course, as I made mention of before, even to Mr. Stephen, because the matter is under investigation, I'm not at liberty to disclose any information at this time. But thank you indeed for your question, Andrew.
We now move on to the second round of questions. Stephen Cerillion, you have the floor.
Well, my final question, I guess it will have to be directed to all ministers present. Today is the International Day of the Eradication for Poverty. Neither you address that situation. My question is, what is the various ministries doing to ensure that work is in the making to eradicate poverty? The Secretary General of the United Nations said that well over 800 million people throughout the world are living in poverty. He also said that there is a significant decrease in their trying to handle the situation. But what is St. Martin doing to eradicate poverty?
Stephen, allow me first of all to thank you for your question. And indeed, poverty is a very important topic to discuss. And what is the government of St. Martin doing about that? First priority, of course, is to get the economy back on track. What happens when you have an economy up and running? Businesses are booming, jobs are created, and there's the stimulation of a vibrant country, a vibrant economy. So every single day we come to work from early morning until sometimes late evening, weekends, holidays, and rainy days. We're busy trying to get this country back on track. That includes getting cruise ships in port, airlines arriving through our airport, getting the airport up and running, and most importantly, the creation of jobs. And I'm sure my other colleagues in the Council of Ministers can testify to their hard work and efforts on a daily basis with their support staff. And you know, the main thing about it is that is the focus. That is why in my opening address, I made it quite clear that my focus every single day is getting up and making sure that this country gets back on track. And I hope that the media and other persons continue to contribute positively to that, as indeed we need to get this country back on track and eradicate poverty in our country, because today persons are still without jobs, roofs are still not fixed in homes after Hurricane Irma, and there's many ills in this country that we do need to address. So I look forward to, of course, all efforts and all positivity going in that direction to make St. Martin the greatest country in the world like we know it can be.
Thank you, Minister Johnson. Do I have any other ministers? Minister Lee?
Yes. Thank you for that question. Of course, I'm sure that all the ministries are busy dealing with this topic to ensure that poverty is eradicated, and it was a very prominent, or still is a very prominent topic in the governing program. Of course, in education, we're doing whatever we can to ensure that all children are educated, because this is also a way to deal with poverty. And just recently, we established a committee that deals with the evaluation of the quality of the teaching profession. As you raise the level of teachers and the quality of teaching, you're also raising the level of education, which is also a way of eradicating poverty.
Thank you, Minister Smith. Minister Lee?
Thank you, Stephen. You know, I think it's a great question, and it's actually very relevant to a couple of the conferences that I've attended recently. You know, as Minister of TIAT touched on, number one, and as I mentioned as well even in the ILO conference, if we talk about employment, if we talk about quality employment, we have to talk about the economy. We have to get the jobs and good paying jobs online. From St. Martin's perspective, I think that really translates to, as a first step, we need to ensure that the airport is reopened as quickly as possible, because that is the gateway that brings in the people to the island, and that's something that certainly has the concerns of the entire Council of Ministers. Because without our tourism industry back in track, there won't be budget, and you won't have resources for the various programs that you would like to fund. But that said, there's a lot that we are doing already, even as a result of post-Irma. So as I mentioned in my earlier discussion, our emergency income support and training program, right? So this is specifically geared towards those who are underemployed. In other words, their hours have been reduced or unemployed. So this is an opportunity for them to go to training programs, learn a skill, and receive a stipend and health insurance as compensation, as a cash transfer. In other words, that's a way to transfer money to the people who are, without that, can't make ends meet. And I've seen, Andrew, I've seen your post and the video of the interview that you did, actually, with some of the people who are participating in the program through I think they're they're Great Bay employees. And it pains me. It hurts, because I know there's a limited budget, and we're doing the best we can, but for those people, it's still very difficult to make ends meet. So, but that is unfortunately our current economic reality. In reality, universal health insurance is also very much about protecting against poverty. If you heard in the definition, one of the points is that you have access to care without having financial hardship. There are many people in the community, because they don't have the correct health insurance or access to health insurance, have to dig into their pocket, put their families in financial hardship in order to fund their health care costs. That's actually part of protection against poverty. Of course, the ministry, we have our financial aid and medical aid programs, so we've made sure that in the budgets that we have an increased allocation for those programs, so that people who do need that help, they are coming into the ministry, they're getting help. Minister of Romy touched on our reintegration shelter. I actually happened to visit the shelter yesterday. It's a great program. It's a program that we have social workers there. So we have people who are coming in who have problems with their housing situation, but they come in, but they get the social assistance as well. Many of them, for example, are not aware of all of the different government programs that they can access. So the Dr. J Foundation works with each of the persons to say, look, are you applying for financial aid? Are you applying for medical aid? Do you know there's a number of different roofing programs that are out there? The UNDP has one, Salvation Army has one. So there's a number of programs. So they're helping to connect these people to resources and different programs to, again,
lift them out of the poverty. And I think as Minister of Education touched on, you have to look at root causes. If we look at unemployment, if we look at some of the statistics in our previous labor surveys, there's a very clear correlation between education and unemployment. The lower the education, the higher incidence of unemployment. So I think addressing things at a root cause is also a key part of our poverty alleviation strategy.
Thank you, Minister Lee. Thank you, ministers, for your responses. I would now like to call on Lyndon Brown. You have the floor.
Okay, I have Minister Johnson. In so much there's a lot of negative, there's a lot of positivity. The way forward with the harbor, we have seen things are going with speed. The airport, the Great Bay Hotel, going to start soon to rebuild. So tell us some of the development in the distant future. So we are just riding over the negative and letting people see the positive.
Mr. Brown, thank you, of course, for your question. And at the harbor, we just celebrated recently the 1 millionth cruise ship passenger and the inaugural call of the Carnival Horizon. Future plans, of course, for the harbor includes the extension of Pier 2. That is very important to get more cruise berths coming to our island. That means more passengers coming on board our shores and being able to spend in town and throughout the island on tours as well as other activities that they do on island. We are busy now in the middle of a shareholders meeting, so I have the shareholders meeting on recess, so we finalize all the financials, all the other arrangements that have to be done in regards to meeting with me as shareholder. And of course, I look forward to a positive outcome very soon as well to the harbor and the mitigation of things that were also happening at the harbor, with all persons being involved collectively for a positive outcome. So thank you for your question.
Thank you, Minister Johnson. I would now like to invite Minister Giterson to give his response to Mr. Cerulean's question. Minister Giterson.
Thank you for that, Ms. Roach. Thank you for the question, Mr. Cerulean. My fellow ministers left very little space for me to add because their answers, their responses were so on point. But from the Ministry of Rummy's perspective, I just want to say that we are doing all that we can to expedite the permits for the hotels so that we can have those back on track, the building permits for the hotels, so we can have those back on track so that those hundreds of jobs can be fulfilled. And yeah, that is a way of helping eradicate the poverty on St. Martin. Thanks.
Thank you, Minister Giterson. Angelique, you have the final question.
This question is for Minister Smith. Concerning, of course, the Christian Party, the openness is one of the platforms that you ran on during the last election. Your silence is being criticized by, of course, the members of Parliament, some members of Parliament, concerning the controversy of the Minister of Tiat and the Ministry of Rummy. Why the silence?
Thank you for the question. As both ministers have said, their matters are being investigated, and at this time we're awaiting the outcome of those investigations. Furthermore, as soon as we get those facts, and I have also recently asked Mr. Johnson for information, as soon as we get that, we will certainly share whatever information we have received from them with the public. So we are taking note of what is happening, and being a party that has said that we will be open and transparent, we will be coming to the public and sharing information that we have received.
Thank you, Minister Smith, for your response. Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, radio listeners, and online viewers, this brings us to the end of the Live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, October 17th, 2018. For rebroadcast, tune in every evening at 7 p.m. on St. Martin Cable TV. For video on demand, log on to the official government's website at www.stmartingov.org. On behalf of the Department of Communication, I'm Roleika Roach, and do have a pleasant day further.